Warning lights flashed like dying stars on the command deck of the Imperial surveillance station. Fleet Admiral Texal stood before a massive monitoring screen, his forearms folded behind his broad back, staring impatiently at the stream of data. For 3 millennia, the Zapirian Empire ruled the galaxy with absolute authority. Nothing happened within Imperial territory without their knowledge. Nothing moved without their permission. To this day, Admiral, we are experiencing widespread sensor anomalies, sensor technician Lyra reported from the station below. There was a tremor in her voice that Texnor found unpleasant. The young officer had only been on the force for 20 cycles, far from old enough to understand the weight of Imperial power. There was currently chaos in 6 sectors simultaneously. Texar's jaw clicked in frustration. Technical malfunction. The outer rim sensor arrays were showing signs of aging. Get a maintenance crew and stop bothering me with minor issues. But Lyra was undeterred. She pressed a few control buttons, and the main display switched to a galactic map. Red dots flashed on multiple systems, each representing a sensor blackout or an unexplained energy signature. With all due respect, this is not a random malfunction. The pattern is all too regular. Something is interfering with our coordinated detection systems. Tex didn't look at her fully. His height of nearly 10 feet cast a shadow over her station. Who? The Krell pirates could barely navigate their stolen ships. The Vex Collective hadn't left their territory in 2 centuries. Who on Earth could blind Imperial sensors across 6 sectors? Lyra hesitated, then spoke quietly. The command deck was silent. Several officers looked up from their posts. One of them, Commander Vexal, let out a roaring laugh. Humans. Those primitive creatures barely understand faster than light travel. They huddled in pitiful colonies in the outer zones, playing with technology stolen from crashed Imperial research vessels. Texar's expression darkened. Humans had been a bit of a nuisance for the past 40 years. When the Imperial invasion reached their small group of worlds, they fought back, claiming the territory for their own. As always, the Empire fought back with inferior species and took what they wanted. As a warning, several human colonies were destroyed. The survivors retreated to the farthest reaches of explored space. Small-scale skirmishes have continued ever since. Human raiders attacked supply convoys, and human spaceships disrupted mining operations. There is no threat to Imperial power, merely the desperate struggle of a dying species refusing its place in the natural order. Humanity is not involved, we assure you. Focus on the real threat. These sensor malfunctions are likely due to solar activity or equipment degradation. 3 hours later, Patrol Squadron 17 stopped reporting. Texnar was checking his supply inventory when the communications officer interrupted. Admiral, we've lost contact with Patrol Squadron 17. They were investigating one of the anomalies in the Outer Reach sector. They've lost contact. Texnar put down his data tablet. What do you mean, lost contact? We've lost all communication, sir. The transponder signal has disappeared. We sent out a recovery team about 20 minutes ago, but they haven't found anything. No wreckage, no distress signal, no energy signal. It's as if the entire squadron has vanished. The 17th Squadron consisted of 12 warships and over 3,000 personnel. A vessel of that size simply cannot disappear. For the first time, XR felt genuine concern. Send 2 squadrons to investigate. Activate all scanners at maximum range. Find any loose hull planks. The investigation team found nothing. No wreckage, no bodies, no evidence that 17th Squadron had been in the sector. The only clue was a single sensor reading recorded just before the squadron disappeared. There was a momentary surge of energy that did not match any known technology recorded in Imperial databases. Over the next 4 days, 3 more squadrons disappeared. Grand Imperator Zune arrived at Station Vigilance aboard his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. Dexar greeted him in the station's central command center, a vast room lined with holographic displays showing the entire Imperial realm. The Emperor was aged. Even by Zephyrian standards, his scales had faded from deep purple to pale lavender, and he moved with the deliberateness of someone who had witnessed centuries of history. Show me, Zan ordered without preamble. Texar brought up his tactical display. Red zones showed where the platoon had disappeared, and yellow indicators showed where an unexplained sensor malfunction had occurred. Green dots indicate the location of the Imperial fleet, currently retreating into defensive formations around major star systems. Contact has been lost with a total of 48 ships. Reports from the nulls indicate no survivors, no wreckage, and no explanations. This pattern suggests a coordinated attack, but we see no evidence of enemy action. Our ships simply vanish. Zeltun stared at the map for a moment. You believe humanity is to blame, Zeltun considered. Humanity was to blame. There was no question about it. Texar chose his words carefully. Perhaps we underestimated them. Intelligence reports from Imperator over the past year suggest that humanity is developing new technology. Their attacks are becoming more sophisticated. They are evading our patrols with unusual success. Zeltson said that evading a patrol is one thing, but wiping out an entire force without a trace is another. Our latest assessment indicates that humanity has fewer than 100 capital ships. Even if they all launched a simultaneous attack, they would not be able to threaten the Empire's strength. Perhaps our assessment was wrong. Zeltson turned away from the display. Strengthen patrols in all sectors. Establish listening posts on the outskirts. If humanity is responsible, find them and destroy them. The galaxy must understand that it cannot withstand the Imperium. Vexar saluted. But as the Emperor left, he felt a cold certainty well up in his chest. They were missing something crucial. Humanity wasn't acting like a desperate dying species, they were acting like hunters. Late that evening, after most of the day shift personnel had left, Lyra approached the command platform. "Admiral, I have something to show you. I've been analyzing the sensor data from the disappearance." Texar motioned for her to continue. The energy spikes that appeared just before each disappeared. I'd checked the database multiple times. They didn't match any known faster-than-light signals, but there was a pattern. The spikes came in pairs, a few milliseconds apart. It was like I was seeing the arrival and departure signals of the same ship. It couldn't be. No technology exists today that can travel at such speeds. Not even Imperial technology. Lyra corrected quietly. But what if humanity developed something new? What if we found a way to travel through space without using a traditional faster-than-light drive? Texar stared at her. The implications were immense. Faster-than-light travel required a ship to enter hyperspace, follow a set course, and then return to normal space. This process could take hours, or even days, depending on the distance. Ships in hyperspace could be detected, tracked, and intercepted. The Empire's entire defensive strategy depended on control of these hyperspace routes. If humanity could bypass the system entirely, travel from one place to another in an instant, every defensive position, every fortification, every strategic calculation would be meaningless. "Show me the data," Lyra said, bringing up the results of her analysis. Once we knew what to look for, the pattern was clear. Brief, seemingly random flashes of alien energy throughout Imperial airspace. Signatures of arrival and departure appeared every few minutes or hours, and every location was consistent with missing patrols or malfunctioning sensors. They were watching us. Vexar realized this wasn't an attack. It was a reconnaissance mission. The humans were moving freely through our territory, observing fleet positions, defense patterns, everything. For how long? Lyra highlighted an old sensor log from months ago, a trail that stretched back to our archives. I dismissed it as sensor ghosts or cosmic background radiation, but if my guess was correct, humans had been spying on Imperial space for at least a year, maybe longer. Around 7 quotes made, and Estate Texar felt his confidence shake. For decades, the Empire had viewed humans as primitive scavengers playing with stolen technology. But what if the truth was different? What if humanity had studied their enemy meticulously, knowing every weakness, and preparing for something big? We must inform His Majesty immediately. Before Lyra could react, alarm horns blared throughout the station. Comm lines were flooded with reports of panic from across the sector. Texar opened his tactical display and felt his blood run cold. 40 systems reported the same thing. Imperial defense platforms were offline, not from an attack, but from a systemic shutdown. Someone had infiltrated the network and inserted code that simultaneously disabled weapons, shields, and communications. And then not just a few dozen ships. Hundreds, not thousands, of new contacts appeared on sensors across 50 different star systems. Humanity wasn't hiding on the fringes, nursing its wounds and planning desperate attacks. They were assembling a fleet. The station's alert command deck descended into controlled chaos. Officers shouted reports, trying to make sense of the situation. The holographic screen showed human warships appearing all over Imperial space, carefully planned positions to attack supply depots, repair facilities, and communications points. "Count them," Dexthor demanded, cutting through the static. "How many ships are we up against?" The tactical officer's hands trembled as he operated his console. "Admiral, we're detecting transmissions of at least 2,000, possibly more. They are using some kind of stealth technology. The ships appear and disappear faster than we can track them. There must be 2,000 of them. Human capital ships must number less than 100. Either Imperial intelligence has suffered a catastrophic failure, or the humans have been building a fleet in secret for years. An urgent transmission has come in from Imperial Central Command. Zatun's face appeared on the screen, his expression solemn. Fleet Commander, this is Great Emperor Zatun. We are on full-scale war footing. Humanity has launched a coordinated attack across Imperial territory. All forces are to engage human vessels and eliminate them where they are. This is no longer a border skirmish. This is all-out war. Texel accepted the order and began to organize his forces. But even as he watched the human ships methodically destroy the Imperial defenses with deadly efficiency, he could not shake one horrifying thought. Humanity had been planning this for a long time, and the Empire in its arrogance had given them all the time they needed. Fleet Admiral Texel stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Righteous Vengeance, watching on his view screen the expanding cluster of forge worlds of Hectorus Prime. The system was vital to Imperial military production, housing 3 massive orbital foundries that manufactured everything from ship armor to weapon systems. If humanity truly plans war against the Imperium, it must capture or destroy facilities like Hector Prime. That is precisely why Texer has sent the 3rd Fleet here. 300 warships, including 12 dreadnoughts, are protected by thousands of automated defense platforms. Humanity would be foolish to attack such a well-fortified base. Navigators report arrival within 2 hours. The system defense grid indicates all platforms are online and ready. Sire nodded. But something felt wrong. The journey from Station Vigilance had taken 4 days through hyperspace. During that time, reports from across Imperial space told of a disturbing situation. Human ships appearing everywhere and nowhere, appearing unannounced, striking with precision, then disappearing before Imperial forces could react. A supply convoy was destroyed yesterday near the Kiras Nebula. Escorts reported that the attackers appeared out of nowhere, destroyed 18 freighters in less than 10 minutes, then vanished. Imperial losses totaled 43 ships, 0 casualties. His communications officer interrupted him. Admiral, we've received a transmission from Hector Main Defense Command. It's requesting an authorization code. Please transmit. There was a brief pause, then the communications officer spoke again. Commander, no response. The communications line is still open, but no one is responding. Please try again. We're responding, Commander. The connection was established, but there was silence on the other end. Exner felt his skin tingle. Tactical scan the system. Full sensor sweep. I want to know what's going on before we get close. The tactical officer worked at his console, then froze. His face went pale, and when he spoke his voice trembled. Admiral, we have detected multiple human vessels in the system, maintaining positions around the foundry in orbit. How many? 73 capital ships, sir, and all 3 foundries are showing human transponder code. They have captured the system. The bridge is silent. Taking Hectorus Prime should have been impossible. The system had 30,000 personnel, automated defense systems, and a permanent garrison of 4. Even if the humans had attacked in overwhelming numbers, they would have had time to send out a distress signal, a warning or something. When exactly did this happen? Texel demanded. When did the attack begin? The tactical officer checked the readings. That's correct, Commander. There are no signs of an attack, no piles of rubble, no damaged stations, and no signs of weapons fire. The defense platforms are intact but offline. The garrison ships are in their docking bays and powered down. It's like everyone has stopped fighting. Let me get a vision. I want to see that foundry. The main view screen switched to show the first orbital foundry. The massive structure floated in space, its lights flashing normally, but human warships surrounded it in a defensive formation. And there it was, a looping message, transmitted openly on standard frequencies. A human figure appeared on the screen. She was a woman, short and not as well built as Zapirian, but something about her expression caught his eye. Her hair was black, pulled back tightly, and her eyes the color of Earth's oceans. She was wearing a military uniform with a symbol on it. Texor didn't know who it was. I am Commander Sarah Chen of the Human Combined Fleet, she said quietly. Hectorus Prime is currently under human control. The Imperial forces stationed here have been disarmed but not harmed. Defenses have been disabled and communications are being monitored. You have 2 options. Immediate withdrawal or be destroyed. You have 1 hour to make a decision. The message started again. Commander Vexel, the Texel's second-in-command, growled. This is an insult. A single human threatens the 3rd Fleet. We must destroy every ship in this system, and reclaim what is Imperial. Sire held up a hand for silence. His mind raced, analyzing the situation. 73 human ships against 300 of his own. The Imperials had a 3-to-1 numerical advantage, but a dozen battles over the past week had seen the Imperials have similar numerical advantages, and all had ended in devastating Imperial losses. Conduct a tactical analysis, he ordered. What are the chances of success if we engage? The tactical officer moved quickly. Judging from past encounters with human ships, their weapons have longer range and greater accuracy than ours. Their ships also have greater speed and maneuverability. In a direct engagement, our numerical superiority would give us an advantage, but casualties would be heavy. Losses were estimated at 40–60% of the fleet, meaning that up to 180 ships would be lost to retake a single star system, and that was assuming no reinforcements were waiting on the human side. How on earth had they managed to occupy this star system without anyone noticing? Vexel asked the question everyone had been thinking. Lyra had been transferred to the Norse flagship at his request. She had proven herself on the station's watch, and he wanted her analytical skills at hand. Now she spoke up from the station. Commander, I'm reviewing the sensor logs of Hectorus Prime's defense network. We're still receiving signals, so we have access to historical data. What do you see? I don't see anything, Commander. And that's the problem. There's no record of any attack whatsoever. But 3 weeks ago, several defense platforms were taken offline for routine maintenance. But the maintenance wasn't scheduled. Someone had sent false commands to the systems. 3 weeks ago, humanity had invaded Hectorus Prime 3 weeks ago, when the Empire still considered them a minor threat. Lyra continued. The platforms appeared to be back online with their original software, but we are detecting an anomaly in their operating protocol. I believe the humans have installed a backdoor in the system, a hidden access point, allowing them to shut everything down remotely when they're ready. What happened to the garrison? Dexter asked. 48 ships and 30,000 men are not going to surrender without a fight. No, but one morning we woke to find every weapon system disabled, every communication line jammed, and 70 human warships surrounding the base, their firepower enough to crack it like an egg. The situation became clear. The humans had not attacked Hectorus Prime in the traditional sense. They had infiltrated, penetrated its defenses, and then emerged in overwhelming numbers. By the time the Imperials realized what was happening, the resistance had become futile. Zunor had been a soldier for 3 centuries. He had fought against Krell pirates, the Vex Collective, and a dozen other species. He understood tactics, strategy, and the application of military force. But something was different this time. This was a war waged in the shadows, one that would be won or lost before a single shot was fired. He ordered, opening a line with Commander Chen. A human face appeared on the screen. She was younger than expected, 40 or 50 cycles by human standards, but her eyes held the dignity of a commander. I am Marshal Texor of the 3rd Fleet, he announced. I have been authorized to negotiate on behalf of the Zapirian Empire. There is nothing to negotiate, Chen replied calmly. Withdraw the fleet, or be annihilated. That's the only condition. We're outnumbered 3-1. Even if we have superior technology, we can't defeat the full might of the 3rd Fleet. Chen smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. Admiral, you two should save time. You're right that we're outnumbered. You're wrong that we can win. Your ships are predictable. You follow doctrines written centuries ago, designed to fight enemies who play by the Empire's rules. We don't play by your rules. 8. Bold words from the commander of a small force. Not bold, honest. Tell me, Admiral, have you reviewed last week's battle report? How many times did your forces successfully engage human ships? And of those engagements, how many resulted in an Imperial victory? Exar's jaw clenched. The answer was humiliating. 0. Not a single confirmed kill. The only losses to the human capital ships, Chen continued, were a few small support ships sacrificed as decoys. You might think that's not right. We have a fleet of 300 ships in formation. How can we do hit and run with that many? But you'd be wrong. They don't do hit and run. They just attack. She gestured off screen, and suddenly the Righteous Vengeance's tactical display lit up with a new contact. Human ships appeared throughout the 3rd Fleet's formation, not directly in front of them but between them, positioned very close to the Imperial fleet. What you're seeing is a simulation, Chen explained. If you attack, this is what will happen. My ships will skip-jump directly into your formation. At that distance, your larger ships would be unable to maneuver effectively. Your ships would be firing at each other in an attempt to attack us, while we would attack your command ship and ammunition stores. The battle would last approximately 30 minutes. Your losses would be heavy. The simulation displayed on the Texol screen was frightening in its inefficiency. Human ships appeared and fired deadly barges at close range, but disappeared before any return fire could land. Imperial ships collided with each other as they attempted to target the humans, throwing the formation into chaos. When the simulation ended, All Imperial ships were destroyed or disabled. Of course, Chen said, that is only one option. We can retreat. The ship and crew will survive. We can fight another day. The choice is yours, Admiral, but you have only 58 minutes to decide. The channel was closed. Vexiel raged. She was bluffing. Such precision in a jump was beyond the capabilities of any skill. Even if it were possible, the energy required would be astronomical. Their ships would exhaust their drives just to attempt it. But Lyra shook her head. Commander, I've analyzed their jump signature. They're not using a conventional faster-than-light drive. It's something entirely different. Whatever technology they developed, it wouldn't fit with our understanding of how hyperspace works. I believe they could do exactly what Commander Chen had just threatened. Texar looked around the bridge. He could see the fear on the faces of his undefeated officers. The Empire had ruled so long, so completely, that the very concept of defeat was foreign to them. But Texar had lived long enough to remember the lessons of history. All empires eventually fall. Every dominant force was eventually surpassed. The question was whether they recognized the change when it came, or fought blindly until there was nothing left. Take the helm, he said quietly. Plan an escape route out of the system. Retreat. Vexol stared at him in shock. Admiral, you've got to be kidding me. We are the Third Fleet. We will not retreat when outnumbered. We are not retreating, Texar said firmly. A tactical retreat. No, we will not sacrifice 300 ships and 60,000 men for pride. Texar opened communication links with the rest of the fleet. This is Admiral Vexner. We are retreating from Hectorus Prime. Maintain formation and prepare to transition to hyperspace, as per my order. Protests from the other commanders came quickly, but Seer cut them off. This is not an argument. We have been outmaneuvered. This system is controlled by humanity, and we do not have the resources to retake it without unacceptable losses. Report to Emperor Zathun and request reinforcement. Until then, retreat. As the Third Fleet turned away from Hectorus Prime and began the jump to hyperspace, Texal watched the human ships on his tactical display. They did not pursue or provoke, they simply held their ground, professional and disciplined. They were not like the desperate raiders he had fought before. They were trained military professionals, executing meticulously planned operations, and somehow the Empire missed the moment when humanity transformed from scattered colonists into a legitimate military force. The jump to hyperspace was activated, and Hector Prime disappeared from view. But Shixal knew the image of Commander Sarah Chen would stay with her for a long time, not because of the threat but because of the quiet confidence in her eyes. She knew he would retreat. She was counting on it. Humanity wasn't just winning the battle. They were winning the war long before the Empire even knew the real war had begun. The Imperial throne world, Zephyrus Prime, shone like a jewel in the void. Vast cities covered 3 continents, connected by orbital elevators that stretched into space. Millions of ships traveled daily, carrying goods and passengers across the Empire's territory, which spanned 800 star systems. For 3,000 years, the planet was the center of galactic civilization. Today, the Empire was in fear. Emperor Zakun sat in his war chamber, surrounded by holographic displays showing the rapidly deteriorating military situation. In the 3 weeks since the fall of Hector Prime, humanity had captured or destroyed Imperial assets in 47 star systems. Entire fleets had been ambushed and decimated. Supply lines had been cut off. Communications were compromised. The worst part wasn't the losses themselves but the fear. The people of the Empire, who had lived their entire lives in absolute security, now wondered if the Empire could protect them. The world was calling for reinforcements for garrisons that no longer existed. Merchant ships refused to sail without a military escort. The economy was beginning to strain under the weight of a war that seemed impossible to fight. How many ships are left? Zuthun asked his military advisor. Supreme Commander Clarus scrutinized the data. The Imperial Army has approximately 7,000 capital ships operational across its fleet. However, many are scattered across its territory. Integration will take several weeks. What on earth are the humans doing while we integrate? Clarus's expression darkened. They are continuing their attacks. Yesterday, they destroyed the supply base at Merlin Station. 3 days ago, they seized the repair facilities on Ty. They are moving faster than we can react and attacking where we are weakest, avoiding direct confrontation with our greater forces. Admiral Texar, who had been summoned to the throne world after the retreat from Hector Prime, cleared his throat. Your Imperial Majesty, if you would be so kind as to speak frankly, please do so. Frankness is rare in this chamber these days. We are fighting this war the wrong way. We deploy our forces in fixed defensive positions, protecting assets that humanity has already mapped and planned to attack. Meanwhile, they move freely through our territory, using technology we do not understand. We cannot win even if we defend everything. We must bring them back to us on our terms. Zathun leaned forward. Explain. Dexar brought up the star chart. A star system appeared, highlighted in gold. A nexus gate, the only hyperspace corridor connecting the outer territories to the Imperial core. All ships traveling between the frontier and Zephyrus Prime must pass through this system. If humanity wishes to threaten our core planets, they must do so through a nexus gate. So I propose that you fortify it, and not just fortify it. Your Majesty, I propose that you make it the most heavily defended outpost in the history of the galaxy. Withdraw all available ships from the outer regions, and concentrate all military forces at this one point. Humanity has proven adept at hit-and-run tactics against scattered forces. Let's see how they handle the inevitable concentrated defense. Supreme Commander Claros studied the map. It's a sensible strategy, but it would mean completely abandoning the outer region. It would leave hundreds of planets defenseless. That world is already lost, Dexar said bluntly. Humanity controls the space lanes. They decide the time and place of battle. If we split our forces and try to protect everything, we will lose everything. But if we concentrate on the Nexus Gate, we can create a choke point that humanity cannot bypass. Zathun has considered this. The political cost of abandoning such a large territory would be enormous. But Snore was right about one thing. Our current strategy isn't working. Something has to change. Good. Give the order. Retreat all fleets to the Nexus Gate. We'll hold out there. He paused, then added. And activate the Dreadstar fleet. The room was silent. The Dreadstar fleet consisted of 12 ancient warships. These massive ships were constructed during the Imperial Wars of Expansion 5 centuries ago. Each was over 10 kilometers long, and packed with weaponry capable of shattering planets. So powerful, and requiring so few resources to operate, that they were put into storage after the war ended. The Empire never needed them again. Claros warned that it would be weeks before the ships could be operational again. Crews need training, systems need testing, then they will be activated immediately. I want these ships operational and combat ready. Humanity has proven itself a serious threat. Now is the time to show them the true power of the Empire. The order was issued that very day. Fleet commanders throughout Imperial space received the order. Abandon the outer regions. Withdraw all forces to the Nexus Gate. Prepare for the battle that will decide the outcome of the war. Aboard the Righteous Vengeance, Texal watched the fleet assemble. Ship after ship emerged from hyperspace and took up positions around the massive gate structure. Within 2 weeks, over 8,000 Imperial warships had converged in a single star system, the largest concentration of military power the galaxy had seen in centuries. The Nexus Gate itself was a marvel of engineering, a man-made structure with a vast ring of exotic matter stabilizing the hyperspace corridor that ran through it. Without the gate, ships would have had to take a detour of months to reach the core worlds. With the gate, the journey would only take a few days. It was a veritable bottleneck. Exnor stood on the bridge, watching the defensive platforms unfold around the gate. Minefields filled the air, tracing carefully planned patterns. Energy screens created overlapping seas of fire, and long-range missile batteries were locked into place. If humanity wanted to advance toward the core worlds, they would have to survive this battle. Lyra approached hesitantly. As always, Admiral, I have completed my analysis of humanity's tactics and strategy. They follow the principles of Terran military history. I have studied archival records from before we achieved spaceflight. Humans have been fighting each other for millennia, developing increasingly sophisticated methods of warfare. The strategies we see today, mobility, deception, targeting enemy supply lines rather than armies, are ones humans have used against each other for millennia. Texthor worried. Empires rose to power relatively early in history. After conquering their home system, they expanded into a galaxy where most other species were at a similar or lesser stage of development. Yes, there were wars, but never anything like the kind Lyra was talking about. So you're saying the reason humans are better at war than we are is because they've had more training? Not just training, sir, it's evolution. Human societies that were bad at war were conquered by human societies that were good at war. Over millennia, they'd refined their fighting techniques to a degree no other species ever needed. When they reached space, they brought all that knowledge with them. So how do we fight them? Lyra hesitated. Honestly, I don't know. Just when you think you understand their tactics, they show you something new. They adapt faster than we can react. However, if your plan works and you can force them into conventional combat at the Nexus Gate, their advantage will fade. In a head-on clash with overwhelming numbers, the laws of physics still matter. 3 days later, the Dreadstar fleet arrived. Texthor had seen many impressive ships before, but he was completely unprepared for the sight of the Dreadstar. The lead ship, the Invincible Fury, was a mobile fortress. Its hull was thick enough to outshine even those capable of vaporizing smaller ships, and it carried 12 cannons capable of firing with devastating accuracy across the system. The fleet commanders gathered aboard the Invincible Fury for a briefing. Arch-Emperor Zathun himself was present via holographic link. "The situation is clear, commanders," Zathun began. "The humans have been raiding our territory for several weeks now, but have avoided large-scale combat. Our intelligence indicates that their capital ships total fewer than 2. We have 8,000 ships stationed here at the Nexus Gate, including 12 Dreadstars. If humanity wishes to threaten our core planets, they cannot bypass this position. If they come, we will destroy them utterly." The remains of the 5th Fleet commander raise a question. "Your Majesty, what if they never come? What if they continue their assault strategy? Where we will accomplish nothing of strategic importance. They could attack the outer territories, but they could not win the war without capturing the core worlds, and they could not reach the core worlds without going through us. They would come eventually." The briefing ended, and the fleet was put on standby. Days passed, then long-range scouts reported human activity throughout the abandoned territories. They were establishing bases, fortifying positions, building infrastructure, but they made no move toward the Nexus Gate. Vexthor began to suspect that humanity might avoid confrontation altogether. Perhaps the Empire was content to control the periphery while protecting its core. A division of territory, not all-out war. Then, 31 days into the blockade, a scouting team reported something that changed everything. "Admiral, there are approaching ships," the sensor officer reported. "Human ships are emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system." "How many?" 47 capital ships, Admiral. Maintaining formation, heading straight for the Nexus Gate. Texthor felt the anticipation rising. At last, humanity was ready for the final battle. Battle position. All ships prepared for battle. This is what we've been waiting for. The ships of the vast Imperial fleet powered up their weapons and shields. Their crews maneuvered into fighting positions. The Dreadstars fired up their main guns, which required enormous amounts of power to operate. The human fleet continued to approach in formation, making no attempt to hide or maneuver. They were heading straight for the Imperial positions, as if they were trying to force their way through, but it made no sense. Lyra became increasingly confused and checked her sensor. "Commander, their approach vector is completely wrong. They're running directly into our strongest line of defense. It's a suicidal attempt." "Perhaps they were desperate," Commander Vexel said. "Perhaps they had finally realized that running and hiding wouldn't win, but Texthor wasn't convinced." Commander Chen didn't seem like the type of person to make such a desperate decision. Every move humanity had made up until now had been meticulously calculated. As the human fleet came within range, a transmission came through on all frequencies. Commander Chen's image appeared on screens throughout the Imperial fleet. "Imperial forces, this is Commander Chen of the Human Combined Fleet. You have blockaded a vital shipping route, threatening free movement of ships in the region. We are here to lift the blockade. This is your last chance to retreat. If you do not retreat, you will be annihilated." The bold statement took his breath away. 47 ships were calling on 8,000 ships to retreat. Zathun's reply came over the command channel. The battle was about to begin. Theor gripped the command rail tighter. He had watched the battle unfold, and the humans were outnumbered 50 to 1. Even with their technological advantage, they would be outnumbered, and they had to be. But as the distance closed and the first weapons fired, Texthor couldn't shake the feeling that he'd missed something crucial. Commander Chen's expression was too calm. "Admiral," Lyra said impatiently, "we've detected abnormal energy readings from the human ship. Skip drives are charging. Are they all there?" "Yes, Commander." Suddenly Texthor's blood ran cold. He suddenly understood. The human fleet marching toward the Nexus Gate wasn't trying to break through the blockade. They were a decoy. "All ships, evacuate immediately," he was about to say. But it was too late. Space began to tear across the Imperial formation, and a human fleet of several hundred ships appeared just inside the defensive perimeter. This was not the 47 ships they had been pursuing. Hundreds more appeared out of nowhere, perfectly positioned to attack the command ship, the munitions depot, and the generators. The humans weren't going to fight their way through the blockade. They were going to fight it from the inside. And as bullets began to fly around the Nexus Gate, Texthor realized the Empire had fallen into a trap set by the humans. The battle for the Nexus Gate began in chaos. Human warships appeared in the center of the Imperial formation. They appeared in gaps between ships that were beyond the reach of defensive fire, without costing any of their allies. They appeared en masse and in all directions, turning the carefully planned Imperial defense into a chaotic nightmare. Alarms blared on the bridge of the Righteous Vengeance, preventing him from even trying to grasp the tactical situation. The carefully organized fleet was suddenly scattered across the system, human ships appearing and disappearing faster than their sensors could track. Weapons reporting, he shouted over the den. Unable to lock on target, Commander, you're moving too fast. Every time you acquire a target, you jump up before firing, then switch to area saturation fire. Fill the space with energy that makes it unavoidable. The order was broadcast throughout the fleet, and the Imperial ships began firing at a wide area, hoping to catch the human ships in the crossfire. But the humans had expected this. They appeared, fired devastating railgun rounds that penetrated Imperial shields, and disappeared before any return fire could arrive. An LRA voice cut through the confusion. Admiral, they're not targeting us indiscriminately. They're attacking specific ships. They're destroying the command ship. Texthor checked his tactical display and felt his stomach churn. She was right. The humans were systematically destroying every ship that controlled the Imperial fleet's movement. Communications hubs, command frigates, and even the fleet coordination centers on the great dreadnoughts were all destroyed, with surgical precision. How do you know which ships to target? Thexel demanded. They've been watching for months, Exthor replied grimly. They know our fleet configurations, our communications protocols, everything. They've planned it down to the last detail. Oh, video. A brilliant flash lit up the view screen. The Imperial aircraft carrier Eternal Watch, home of the regional communications hub, erupted in a fireball. Human ships appeared all around us simultaneously and opened fire, overwhelming our shields in seconds. Commander, the 5th Fleet is reporting heavy losses. Communications officers report 17 ships lost in the past 3 minutes. Commander Rilix has requested permission to retreat, but has been denied. All ships remain in position. Do not break formation. Thank you. Good evening. Don't let us break the formation. But it was already breaking down. Weeks of neat defensive formations had crumbled as captains tried to flee from unannounced human ships. In one case, Imperial ships accidentally fired on each other. Their targeting computers were confused by the sudden appearance of a ship in an unexpected location. Aboard the Dreadstar Invincible Fury, Emperor Zarfan watched the battle unfold in horror. The 12 Dreadstars were supposed to be invincible, but they were too slow, too massive to withstand the lightning-fast human attacks. The human ships would appear and target specific Dreadstar systems, shield generators, sensor arrays, engine clusters, and then disappear before the behemoth could open its massive gunfire. This ship soon concentrate all defensive fire around this ship. The order was create a wall of energy that nothing can penetrate. The Dreadstar's defensive batteries opened up, and a torrent of energy filled the area around the ship. For a moment it seemed to work. A death zone surrounded the Invincible Fury, where no vessel could pass. Suddenly, 3 human ships appeared within the perimeter, a small, safe zone directly against the Dreadstar's hull. The Dreadstar's weaponry was unable to target them. They fired magnetic mines which wrapped around the hull and flew away. What's that? Zelthune asked. The unknown Emperor. Looks like some kind of shaped charge. The mines detonated simultaneously, a concentrated stream of plasma ripping through the Dreadstar's hull. The stream was thin and precise, boring deep into the ship's interior. Within seconds it had reached the main power conduit that powered the ship's main guns. The lights of the Invincible Fury flickered, then went out. Emergency power was activated, but the Dreadstar's behemoth weapon was disabled. The ship was intact and well-armored, but effectively dead in space. The same tactic was repeated for all 12 Dreadstars. Human ships appeared, dropped depth charges, and flew away. Within 10 minutes, every single one of the ancient warships had been disabled, but not destroyed. Vexar watched in disbelief as the symbols representing the stars of terror on his tactical screen turned yellow. Damaged, but not destroyed. The humans weren't even trying to destroy the behemoths, they were simply removing them from the battle as efficiently as possible. It was like a surgical operation, the LRA remarked in awe. They're not wasting ammunition, destroying ships they can disable, they're maximizing the impact of every shot. We've got a priority transmission from one of the outer defense zones. Admiral, this is Commander Krell of the 7th Fleet. We're devastated. Request immediate reinforcements. Texar brought up a tactical display showing the 7th Fleet's location. Everything he saw made his blood run cold. The humans were massing their forces, creating killing zones. Imperial ships were charging into overlapping fire from multiple directions, trying to escape the human attacks. It was a textbook encirclement tactic, perfectly timed. 7th Fleet, cease combat, and retreat to Delta Rendezvous Point. Retreat is impossible, sir. The escape route was blocked. The 7th Fleet, symbol on the tactical displays, began flashing red. Ship after ship went offline. Texar could only watch as the entire fleet was systematically dismantled. Suddenly, Commander Chen's voice rang over the Imperial communications line. Imperial, this is Commander Chen. This battle is lost. The chain of command is collapsing. The defenses are compromised. Give them one last chance to surrender. Put down your weapons and spare your troops. Ignore the transmission. Deng's voice interrupted the communication. All forces, continue the attack. We will not give in to the odds, but the truth was becoming clear to all watching the battle. Numbers didn't matter. Humanity was fighting an entirely different kind of war, one for which the Empire had no doctrine, training or understanding. Suer made a decision. Open a direct line to Commander Chen. What are you doing, Admiral? Vexel asked. I'm trying to save as many lives as I can. Chen's face appeared on his personal screen. Behind her, No couldn't see the calm, organized movements of the bridge crew. There was no panic, no confusion, just professional military personnel performing their duties with deadly efficiency. Admiral Wexner, Chen said, I've been waiting for your call. Tell me how you're doing this. How do you keep your ship moving so precisely? Skip drop. We don't travel in hyperspace like you do. We fold space and jump from one point to another in an instant. It requires immense power and incredible computational precision, but it means we can move our ships anywhere, anytime. That shouldn't be possible, nor should any species survive against an empire that outnumbers them 1,000 times. Humans have a tendency to accomplish the impossible when motivated. She paused for a moment. Come on, Admiral. We know how this battle will end. The question is, how many more will die before it ends? Texel looked at the tactical displays. Over 2,000 Imperial ships had been destroyed or disabled in the past hour. Human losses were fewer than 30 ships, most of which were due to poor timing rather than effective Imperial tactics. The term unconditional surrender of all Nexus Gate forces. Crews will be allowed to evacuate in life pods and small craft. Warships will be seized as spoils of war. Prisoners will be treated according to military code of conduct. If you refuse, I will continue this battle until your fleet is completely destroyed. I have reinforcements waiting, but you have none. Your Imperador is currently trapped in a malfunctioning Dreadstar. Its weapons disabled and its life support systems broken. You only have about 30 minutes left, before your crew begins to suffocate. Suer's eyes widened. He checked the status of the Invincible Fury. Chen was right. The human's charge had not only disabled the weapon, but it also damaged the ship's environmental systems. We could have killed him. Chen agreed that we could, but that is not who we are. We are not here to commit genocide. We are here to win the war. That is something else entirely. A new transmission interrupted their comms. It was Zet Toon. His image was distorted by the ship's systems failing. Admiral Texar, you cannot negotiate with these monsters. You will fight until you are down to the last ship, the last crew member, and the last man standing. The Invincible Fury's communication systems had completely failed, and communication was cut off. Texar looked at Commander Vex. His second-in-command's face was frozen with rage and shame. Around him, the bridge crew awaited orders. Young officers who had never known defeat now faced the prospect of destroying everything they believed in. All Imperial forces, this is Fleet Admiral Tex. His voice was calm, but he had sacrificed everything to maintain it. I order a general ceasefire. Power down all weapons and shields on all ships. Surrender. Protests were immediate. Dozens of commanders raised their voices in protest, demanding that the order be rescinded. But theft would not be tolerated. I will not sacrifice thousands of lives for pride. The battle is lost. The war may be lost, but our people can survive. That was what mattered now. Slowly, reluctantly, the Imperial fleet began to power down. Weapons went offline, shields collapsed, and the human fleet, which had been dancing like ghosts across the battlefield, took up positions around the crippled Imperial fleet. Commander Chen's voice rang out over the channel again. Imperial fleet, launch life pod. Direct them to designated evacuation zones. Medical ships treat the wounded. Search and rescue teams extract survivors from damaged ships. The battle is over. Vexner stood on the bridge, and the crew began evacuation procedures. Vexel approached him, face twisted in disgust. You have dishonored us all. The Empire will remember this day. You will be remembered as the admiral who led the surrender of the most powerful fleet in the galaxy's history. Maybe, Vexor replied quietly, but those 60,000 men will still be alive tomorrow. That is more important than my honor. He turned to Lyra. First, ensure all junior personnel are evacuated. Then pass on a message to Commander Chen. I request permission to remain on the Righteous Vengeance until all crew members are safely evacuated. The LRA nodded and moved to carry out the order, while Texel took one last look at the tactical display. The Nexus Gate, the narrow passage that was supposed to save the Empire, was their greatest defeat. But Commander Chen was right about one thing. This was not genocide or destruction. Humanity could have killed everyone in the system. Instead, they took prisoners, provided medical care, and treated their defeated enemies with dignity. Theor had fought many species in his long career, but never against an enemy like the human. They were warriors when necessary, but they were also something else. Perhaps they still valued honor in victory, he thought as he watched the Imperial life pods drift towards the human rescue ships. There was hope after all, not for the old dying empire, but for something new, something different. 2 hours later, Dexner was the last Imperial officer to leave the righteous vengeance. Human soldiers had boarded the ship to ensure its safety, and they escorted him to the transport with surprising respect. As he was being led away, he caught a glimpse of Commander Chen on the view screen. She was coordinating the evacuation with the same calm, collected efficiency she had displayed throughout the battle. She noticed him looking and nodded slightly. There was no jeer, no triumphant smirk, just an acknowledgement between two soldiers. The transport carried Exner from the battlefield to the human detention center where prisoners were being processed. As they traveled, he overheard the human soldiers talking. "Did you hear? An assault fleet has just jumped into Imperial core space. 3-star systems at once. The throne world was torn apart. Did he think they would surrender after what had happened here? It would be foolish not to." Texler closed his eyes. The war was not over yet, but in his heart he knew the outcome was now in doubt. The Imperium, a great empire that had ruled for 3 millennia, had been destroyed in a single day by an enemy they despised as primitive and worthless. History. No's thoughts were laced with cruel irony. 3 months had passed since the Battle of the Nexus Gate. Fleet Admiral Texler stood in a small room on Concordia, a neutral space station floating between what was once Imperial territory and what was now human-controlled. The room had a single window looking out onto the stars, and Texler had recently found himself gazing out of it. A door opened behind him. He didn't turn around. "We're ready," said the human guard. The young man spoke with an accent, but it was understandable. It was Imperial. Texler knew that humans had a talent for languages and could quickly adapt to new methods of communication. It was one of their specialties. The conference room was huge, with a circular table in the center. Representatives of dozens of species were seated around it. The Imperial governors who had survived the war, the human warlords, the Krell, the Vex, and representatives from half a dozen other species, were watching to see what kind of galaxy would emerge from the ashes of the old order. Great Emperor Zun sat at one end of the table, looking much older than he had been 3 months ago. Following the defeat at the Nexus Gate, the 6 core worlds were lost one after the other. The Imperial forces, including what remained, split into multiple warring factions. Some wanted to continue fighting, others surrendered outright. Some even took their ships to the periphery and disappeared to form independent warlords. The Empire as a unified government no longer existed. Commander Sarah Chen, recently promoted to Admiral, sat across from Deng. She looked tired, but pleased. Next to her were several other human commanders, including Admiral Marcus Webb, who had led the assault on the core worlds, and General Catherine Reeves, who commanded the human ground forces. "Shall we begin?" asked the neutral host, a Vex diplomat named Advisor Sune. "We are gathered here to formally declare an end to hostilities between the Zapirian Empire and the United Human System." Dunn spoke first, his voice heavy with defeat. "The Empire acknowledges responsibility for the acts of aggression that sparked this conflict. It acknowledges that its invasion of human colonial territory was unprovoked and unjustified." He clearly paid a price for uttering those words. In 3,000 years, the Empire had never apologized to anyone. Admiral Chen replied calmly, "The United Human Systems recognizes that many within the Imperial government opposed the invasion and worked hard to prevent further violence. We do not intend to hold the entire Imperial population accountable for the decisions of our leadership." Texel sat behind the delegation as a military advisor, closely watching the proceedings. This was unprecedented. In history, he knew that victorious nations often imposed harsh terms on their defeated counterparts. Entire races that lost wars against the Empire were conquered or enslaved. However, humanity had something else in mind. "Let's discuss the terms." Counselor Surin stated that the human delegation had presented a preliminary framework. Admiral Chen activated a holographic display, showing a map of known space. "Our terms are as follows. First, the Zapirian Empire will recognize the independence and sovereignty of the human united system. All human territorial claims to planets would be permanently nullified." No one objected. The Empire no longer had the authority to enforce those claims after all. Second, the Empire would pay reparations to human planets damaged in the war. The payment schedule would be planned over a 50-year period to avoid economic collapse. Su Wandong nodded slowly. We can agree on that. Third, the Empire will reduce its military to a defensive force appropriate for maintaining internal security. All offensive fleet operations beyond the Empire's borders will be prohibited for 20. There was a murmur among the Imperial delegation at this decision, but soon raised his hand to signal silence. Fourth, all species currently classified as vassals or subjects of the Empire would be given the option of independence. Those choosing to remain within the Imperial governing structure would have to do so voluntarily. Human observers would be present to ensure the choice was genuine. This was where theory expected the most resistance. The Empire controlled dozens of species, some for over 1,000 years. Losing them would mean losing a large part of the Empire's economy and population base. But Soon simply closed his eyes and nodded. Admiral Chen continued. Finally, and most importantly, humanity proposes the formation of a Galactic Federation Council. This council would be made up of representatives from all major races and governments. It would serve as a forum for peacefully resolving conflicts and coordinating responses to threats affecting multiple species. She paused, trying to understand what he meant. Humanity would not be the only authority on this new council. The Zapirian Empire would have an equal say. So did the Krell, the Vex, and any other species who wanted to join. The room fell silent. This was unexpected. Everyone had expected humanity to replace the Imperium as the new dominant force. Instead, they were proposing a truly cooperative government like nothing before in history. A truly cooperative government that spanned multiple species. One of the Imperial viceroys, a woman named Shendra, spoke up. Why? You have won. You can impose any terms you want. You can rule the galaxy like the Empire. Why give us equality? Admiral Chen looked at her thoughtfully. Rule by force and fear does not bring stability, but rather breeds resentment and ultimately rebellion. We learned that lesson thousands of years ago in this world. She pointed to the star chart. Look at the history of humanity. We've been fighting each other for thousands of years. Nation against nation. Ideology against ideology. We've nearly destroyed our own world so many times. But in the end we learned that cooperation brings greater rewards than conquest. Yes, it's harder and it requires compromise, but it works. Admiral Webb added, we are not naive. We know the Empire will not trust us immediately. Some Imperial officers still dream of revenge, but we also know that most people, regardless of species, desire peace and prosperity. We can only achieve that by building something new together. Exor let something slip. If the Empire rebuilds its military and attacks you again in 25 years, all eyes will be on him. Chen smiled slightly. Then Admiral, I'll defeat you again. But honestly, I don't think that's going to happen. For the next 25 years, humans and Zephyrin will be trading together, working together and learning from each other. It's hard to hate someone you do business with. It's hard to kill someone's child playing with yours. You're talking about integration. Zuzan said slowly. Not conquest, but assimilation by peaceful means. I'll call it cooperation. But sure enough, the negotiations continued for hours. Details were discussed, compromises were found, and wording was refined, but the basic framework was maintained. By the end of the day, a provisional peace treaty was drafted and signed. Shaxel walked next to Admiral Chen as the delegation filed out. They were silent for a moment. Then she spoke. Admiral, I have been meaning to thank you for some time. Your decision to surrender at the Nexus Gate saved thousands of lives on both sides. It also ended my career and damaged my reputation. I understand. Nevertheless, I believe you made the right choice. A brave choice. The brave choice was to fight to the death. Chen shook his head. No, that was the easy choice. To follow orders, live up to expectations, and die with honor. Those are the easy thing. To choose dishonorable survival in order to save others, that's a difficult choice. That's true courage, Dexter. Thought. You studied Imperial tactics before the war. You knew how we thought, and how we would react. We studied you, your culture, your military history, your economic system, everything. We prepared for years, calling you primitives. Ah, that was your mistake, but also our strength. You underestimated us because you didn't understand us, but we understood you very well. They reached a fork in the hallway. Chen held out his hand in a human gesture of greeting. Admiral, I authorize you to serve. We will establish a joint human empire military academy. We need someone who understands Imperial doctrine and has the wisdom to teach the next generation about the cost of war. Would you be interested? Texer stared at her outstretched hand, a gesture that seemed human, an offer of cooperation. A year ago he would have felt insulted. Now he slowly reached out and took her hand. It would be an honor. Very well, we'll start in 3 months. And Admiral, please bring along Lyra, the sensor technician. She has great analytical skills. We need people like her. As Chen left, Texer stood alone in the hallway, contemplating the future. The empire he served was no more, but perhaps something better would take its place. 5 years had passed. Texer stood in the auditorium of the Allied Military Academy, looking out over the classrooms of young officers. They were half human, a quarter Zephyrin, and the remainder made up of 12 species. They wore hybrid uniforms that combined human and Imperial design elements, symbolizing the new unified military system. Today we will learn about the Battle of the Nexus Gate. Texer announced. This battle changed the course of galactic history. It demonstrated the importance of adaptability, the dangers of arrogance, and the power of unconventional tactics. You should have known you were there. The students leaned forward and listened attentively. Many of them hadn't been born when the war broke out. To them, it was history, not lived experience. Texner activated a tactical display marking the beginning of the battle. The Empire made several grave mistakes. First, they assumed that superior numbers would guarantee victory. Second, they fought according to centuries-old dogmas. Third, and most importantly, they failed to understand their enemy. A young student from Zephyrian raised his hand. Professor, some historians say that war was inevitable, that humanity and the Empire were destined to clash. Do you agree? No, nothing is inevitable, Texler said firmly. The war came because we chose aggression over diplomacy. We could have negotiated with humanity, made trade agreements, recognized their sovereignty, but we attacked them, thinking their colonies too weak to resist. We created our own enemy. A human student spoke up. But Professor, humanity won the war. Surely that must be a good outcome. War is never good, Texner replied. Indeed, the war led to a union that brought unprecedented peace and prosperity, but it also cost millions of lives. The Empire, humanity, and others caught in the crossfire. We all had families, dreams, and futures. The war destroyed all of that. We study this battle, not to glorify what happened, but so that it never happens again. As the lesson continued, and the teacher explained the tactics and strategies of both sides to the students, she couldn't help but reflect on how much has changed. Lyra is now the Academy's head of strategic studies. Former Imperial officers served alongside their human commanders in the Confederacy Defense Forces. Trade between human and Imperial worlds increased dramatically, and new technologies were developed through collaboration. Mixed-race crews piloted ships that protected the entire Confederacy, and most importantly, a new generation grew up free of old prejudices. The young humans and Zephyrians would attend school together, play together, and eventually build their futures together. After class, Exthor walked the grounds of the Academy, passing by the training grounds where humans and Zephyrians trained together in combat, and seeing students of multiple species working on engineering projects. Their different perspectives produced a solution neither could have developed alone. A familiar figure approached. Admiral Chen, the Allied operational commander, fell into step beside him. Today's lecture was excellent, she said. I watched from the back. You should be teaching this lesson yourself. You were instrumental in the victory, and you had the wisdom to prevent unnecessary slaughter. They both have something to teach them. They walked in friendly silence for a while. Then Chen spoke again. A distress call was received this morning. A remote colony has been attacked by pirate Imperial hybrids, and the United Council has authorized a response. Captain Torvald is in command of the mission. He was one of your former officers, wasn't he? Thier nodded. A good commander. I'm sure he'll do a good job. He had requested that the task force be accompanied by a human ship, a destroyer, specifically. The Resolute had served with the captain in joint exercises and said she trusted his judgment. Cooperation in practice, not just theory. And that was it. They arrived at the observation deck, overlooking the Academy's main plaza. Below, hundreds of students from dozens of races milled between classrooms, ate together in the cafeteria, and studied in mixed groups. Have you ever regretted anything? Chen asked quietly. Surrender, that is, choosing to live with dishonor rather than die as a hero. Texler considered the question. For a year after the war, he had suffered from shame and self-doubt. But over time, he was able to see things objectively. No, he finally said. I saved lives that day. Some of the people I saved are now teaching the next generation on Earth. Their children are studying here. If I had fought with all my might at the Nexus Gate, none of this would have happened. Sometimes the greatest courage is choosing to live with your decisions, even if those decisions mean sacrificing everything you hold dear. Chen nodded. The humans see you as a hero, an admiral wise enough to put an end to a pointless war. We tell your story in a while. Opinions are divided in the Imperial realm, but they are changing. They need time. Time. It's all they have now. Time to heal. Time to build. It's time to create something better. A young human student approached, looking nervous. Excuse me, Professor Texel, but may I ask you a question? Of course, I'm writing a paper on the war, and my paper is that humanity's victory proved we were superior to the Imperium. Do you agree? We looked at the young human seriously. No, I don't agree. Humanity was not superior. You were different. You had developed different technologies, different tactics, and different philosophies. In the context of the war, those differences worked to your advantage. But the Empire had its own strengths, 3,000 years of systematic knowledge, incredible manufacturing capabilities, and a diverse population with unique talents. He pointed around. This coalition is stronger than either the Empire or humanity alone, because it combines their strengths, humanity's innovation with the Empire's institutional memory, humanity's adaptability with the Empire's stability. This is the true lesson. Diversity is not a weakness. It is the foundation of true strength. The student thanked him and hurried off to continue his studies. Chen smiled. You're good at teaching. I had good examples, commanders who taught me that true leadership isn't about dominating, but about bringing out the best in those you lead. They stood together, watching the sun set over the academy ground. In the distance, Confederate ships could be seen on patrol, maintaining a fragile peace. 50 years passed before Texel died peacefully at the age of 4. By that time, the Confederacy controlled over 900. Wars still broke out, but on a smaller scale, and were resolved by negotiation as often as by force. Humans and Zephyrians no longer saw each other as enemies, but as partners. Mixed races were commonplace. Children of mixed human and Zephyrian descent attended schools across the United States. Their very existence symbolized how much had changed. Stories of war became history, legend, and the foundation upon which a new civilization was built. Children learned of the Battle of the Nexus Gate, as their forebears had learned from ancient conflicts, a lesson about the price of pride and the value of wisdom. And across the galaxy, in ships of every design, crews of every species worked together to explore uncharted regions of space. The galaxy learned a hard lesson. As pioneers, not conquerors, partners, not enemies, humanity did not want to be dominated. They simply refused to kneel. And in that refusal, in their stubborn insistence on equality and dignity, they created something far greater than any empire. They created a future worth living in.